It was just a scratch, they said, like I hadn't walked out of their house with blood soaking through the sleeve of my cardigan and teeth marks pressed deep into my forearm. As if the fact that I didn't scream or call the police somehow made it less real. I was there to fix the kitchen light, that's all. The one over the sink that had been flickering since Easter, according to Mom. I brought my toolbox. I brought them lunch. I even brought paper towels because I remembered they ran out last time, and the second I opened the back door, Titan came at me. No bark, no growl, just speed, weight, and pain. My brother Nick shouted, "He's just nervous, Claire." Like that explained the blood. Mom stood there holding a bowl of potato salad, frozen, her mouth slightly open. Dad didn't get up from his recliner. He just called, "Is she bleeding on the tile?" No one ran to check. No one asked if I was okay. I wrapped my own arm in a dish towel and told them I was going to urgent care. I grabbed my keys with my clean hand, got in the car, and drove myself. One-handed. I bled through the towel halfway there. My fingers started going numb. At the clinic, the nurse asked if I wanted to file a report. I said no. Not because it didn't matter, but because I knew exactly how it would play out. Mom would say I overreacted. Dad would say, "That dog's part of the family." Nick would sulk for a week and post some vague quote on Facebook about loyalty and betrayal, and I would become the problem, again. So I paid the $75 copay, filled my antibiotic prescription, and went home. Alone. I didn't call them. They didn't call me. That night, I sat in my apartment with my arm wrapped in gauze, my cardigan in the trash, and my phone face down on the table. Nothing buzzed. Nothing rang. No one asked if I made it home safely. The silence was so loud I had to turn on the TV just to hear another human voice. 3 days later, Nick texted me a photo of Titan curled up on the couch with the caption, "Still the sweetest boy." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, no, "How's your arm?" I didn't reply. I didn't even open the message fully. It previewed on my lock screen and I swiped it away. The wound was healing. The scar was already forming. But that text? That stayed with me. What stuck wasn't the teeth or the pain or the panic. It was the lack of care, the emptiness of it all, the fact that not a single person followed up. Not to check in, not to say thank you, not even to argue. The next time I heard from Mom, it was a text that read, "Can you swing by CVS for Dad's blood pressure meds while you're out?" No mention of what happened. No question about how I was feeling. Just the next task on a never-ending list of errands I never signed up for. I went. I picked up the prescription. I dropped it off. I wiped the counter while I was there. I replaced the flickering light bulb that no one else had gotten around to. I took out the trash. I did it all without being asked and without being thanked. Because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. I sat in the car for 5 minutes afterward, staring out at their driveway like it was a border I couldn't name. Something had shifted. Quietly. Permanently. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a kind of stillness I hadn't felt before. Not peace. Not yet. Just the slow realization that I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not after the childhood I held together with duct tape and late-night apologies. Not after the field trips I paid for myself because there wasn't money. Not after the nights I stayed up with Nick when he was too drunk to find his way home. Not after I sold my guitar to help cover his legal fees. Not after I gave up a job interview in Chicago to drive Dad to physical therapy when he couldn't lift his arm. Not after I paid their electric bill 5 months in a row because they were in a rough patch. It hit me slowly. A quiet kind of grief. I wasn't the family hero. I wasn't even the favorite. I was the help. The dependable one. The one who got things done. The one who showed up, paid up, shut up. The one they called when something broke. The TV, the sink, their lives. And the scratch? It was the first time I had actual proof. Proof that I was disposable. That my pain didn't register unless it inconvenienced them. And even then, the only concern was whether I was bleeding on the tile. The bandage came off a week later. The skin underneath was puckered, pink, and healing slow. I rubbed ointment into it every night, more out of ritual than hope. I wasn't sure if the scar would fade. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to. Some marks should stay, not to relive the pain, but to remember who you were when it happened. The version of me that walked into my parents' kitchen with a bag of groceries, a toolbox, and a favor in her heart. That version deserved a witness, even if it was just a sliver of hardened skin on my arm. Nick hadn't reached out since the text about Titan. No follow-up, no questions, no sorry. He posted photos like nothing had happened. His coffee, his dog, a screenshot of some script he was working on with a quote about resilience in the caption. I didn't engage, I didn't like, didn't comment, didn't even open them. That silence, for once, was mine, and it felt good. Mom texted me 3 times the following week, once for help with her online banking password, once because she couldn't remember what brand of coffee filters they used, and once to ask if I'd picked out anything for Dad's birthday. I hadn't. I wasn't sure I was going. I wasn't sure I was part of that kind of day anymore. But I didn't say that. I just sent back, not yet. Then came the group chat. A new one. Family core. Mom started it. She posted an old photo of us at the Grand Canyon, all sunburned smiles and plastic water bottles. Dad replied with a thumbs up. Nick posted a laughing emoji. I didn't reply. I muted the conversation. I didn't owe them nostalgia. What struck me most wasn't the fact that they moved on. It was that they did it so easily. Like forgetting wasn't forgetting if you framed it as positivity. Like erasing the wound counted as healing. But I remembered. I remembered too well. The blood, the towel, the silence, the way no one met my eyes when I said I was going to urgent care, the way they all let the door close behind me. That Saturday, I saw them again, not because I planned to. I was picking up groceries, real groceries, the kind I never bought when I was constantly restocking their pantry. I had a cart full of things I liked, fresh sourdough, 3 kinds of cheese, cold brew I didn't need but wanted. I turned the corner by the freezer aisle and there they were, Mom, Dad, Nick, together, smiling. Mom held a bag of frozen peas. Dad was pushing the cart. Nick had AirPods in, but he waved when he saw me. Claire, Mom said, too loud, too cheerful, like we were old friends bumping into each other, not fractured pieces of a family. I froze. For half a second I almost smiled back. Reflex. Then I saw the group photo they'd posted earlier that day, captioned, "Nothing more important than family time." I remembered the comments. I remembered who liked it, who didn't ask where I was. "Hi," I said flatly. "We were just talking about you," Mom said. "Weren't we?" No one confirmed. Nick nodded vaguely. Dad looked at the frozen pizzas. I looked at the cart, full of everything I used to buy, same bread, same brand of detergent, like I was still there, like they hadn't noticed I'd been gone. "You doing okay?" Dad asked. His tone was casual, like he was asking a neighbor how the lawn looked after the storm. "I'm fine," I said. A beat passed, the freezer hummed behind us. "Anyway," Nick said, adjusting his earbuds. "Good to see you." He meant it like a period, a dismissal. I nodded and turned my cart down the aisle. I stood in the pasta section for 5 minutes after that, pretending to compare sauces. My hands shook. Not with rage, not with sadness, with clarity. That was the apology, that smile, that silence, that empty interaction. That was all they were going to give me. And it wasn't enough. That night, I started writing a letter. Not to send, not to frame, just to see the truth out loud. Dear family, you hurt me. You watched me bleed and walked away. You made me believe that being needed was the same as being loved. I'm done mistaking obligation for connection. I'm done bending so you don't break. I'm done making space for people who act like I'm just a convenience with a car and a credit card. I'm done being dependable at the cost of being visible. I didn't finish the letter that night, but I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I went for a walk. My neighborhood was quiet, still clinging to summer. I passed kids on scooters, a dog barking at nothing, a yard sale already half packed up. For the first time in years, I didn't check my phone once. I came home and made a breakfast I actually sat down to eat. Eggs, toast, real orange juice. I put the plate in the sink when I finished and didn't immediately start a new task. I stood there, doing nothing, letting the silence be mine. It was the first time I realized how loud life had been, how much noise I'd carried for everyone else, and how much peace was left when I finally put it down. The house looked the same faded siding, same cracked porch step, same ceramic frog by the front door that I bought for Mother's Day when I was 10. It was one of those muggy afternoons in late summer where the sky looks like it might rain, but never does. I hadn't been back in over a month. Not since the incident, not since the freezer aisle, not since I wrote the letter I never sent. And now here I was again, keys in hand, a bag of supplies in the trunk because Dad had a dental appointment, and Mom texted that their hot water heater was acting up. I almost didn't come. I stared at the calendar for half an hour before deciding. I didn't do it for them. I did it because I wanted to know if I could show up differently. On my terms. I let myself in with the spare key they still hadn't taken off the hook by the garage. No one was in the living room. The TV was on, muted, showing some home renovation show. I stood there for a second, absorbing the stale scent of the air, the distant tick of the kitchen clock, and the hum of the old fridge that sounded like it might give up at any moment. The same, and yet not. I wasn't sure if it was the house that had changed, or just me. Mom came out of the hallway wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Claire," she said, surprised but not unkind. "You didn't say you were stopping by?" I shrugged. "You said the heater was out." She nodded quickly, as if trying to remember whether she'd texted that. "Oh, right. It's being finicky. Your father said he could fix it, but you know how that goes." She smiled like it was an inside joke, but I didn't smile back. Nick's door was closed. The same poster still hanging, something with a band logo he used to love. I wondered if he was in there, if he even knew I was here. I didn't knock. I went to the hallway closet, pulled out the old toolbox I bought them 2 Christmases ago, and got to work. It wasn't hard, just a loose wire, some corrosion. 10 minutes later, I had the pilot relit and hot water starting to cycle. I stood in the laundry room afterward, wiping my hands on a rag that smelled faintly of detergent and mildew. I didn't call for anyone. I just stood there. That's when Dad appeared. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe he always looked this way, and I'd only just noticed. He nodded toward the toolbox. "You fixed it?" "Yeah." He nodded again. A beat of silence passed. "You didn't have to come, you know," he said, but it wasn't harsh. More like a confession. "I know," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I told your mom not to bother you, but she worries. She means well." "I know," I said again. Another pause. Then, "Nick's been working. Got a temp job. Warehouse stuff. Night shift." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't care. I just didn't know what to do with that information. Dad shifted. "I know we haven't always said things the right way." "Or at all," I added. He gave a small chuckle. "Yeah, or at all." I didn't press. I didn't forgive. I didn't offer comfort. I just let the silence stretch between us, not angry, not cold, just honest. I packed up the tools and started toward the door. Mom met me halfway, holding a plastic container. "I made lemon bars," she said, her voice gentle. "Thought you might want to take some home." I looked at the container, took it. "Thanks." She looked like she wanted to say more. Maybe ask something, maybe apologize. But she didn't. And I didn't give her the space to. Outside, the air was thicker, the kind of heat that clings to your skin. I walked to my car slowly, not because I was tired, but because I wasn't rushing anymore. I drove home with the windows down, music low, 1 lemon bar eaten before I even hit the highway. It tasted like childhood and distance and something close to peace. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't text them to say I made it safe. I didn't feel the need to report my arrival like I used to. I took a shower. I folded laundry. I read a chapter of a book I hadn't touched in months. Then I opened the notebook, the one with the unfinished letter. I read it again. Slowly, thoughtfully. I didn't cry. I didn't add anything. I didn't tear it out. I just folded it shut and put it in the drawer. Not everything needs to be sent to be said. Sometimes healing isn't a grand moment. It's the quiet choice not to reopen a wound. That night, I sat on my small balcony with a glass of iced tea. The city buzzed in the distance. I could hear someone playing guitar down the block. A dog barked. Somewhere, someone laughed. I listened. I breathed. I stayed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was missing something. I felt full. I didn't go back for them. Not this time. It wasn't a favor, a duty, or guilt. I went because I wanted to see the neighborhood, the one I grew up in, the one I kept driving past without turning in. The trees were taller now, the mailboxes a little more crooked. Mrs. Feeney's porch swing was gone. The neighborhood kids had turned into neighborhood parents. Everything felt slightly moved but still familiar, like a painting hung an inch to the left. I parked by the curb and sat in the car for a full minute, just breathing, just looking. When I stepped out, the air smelled like cut grass and charcoal. A lawnmower buzzed somewhere in the distance. I walked down the block slowly, letting my feet remember the cracks in the sidewalk. I passed the house where Mason Taylor used to shoot bottle rockets and the driveway where I scraped my knees trying to learn how to ride my bike. My childhood was scattered here in pieces, not stories, just glimpses. I didn't want to pick them up. I just wanted to know they were still here. I wasn't planning to stop at the house, but somehow I did. My old house, their house, the one I poured savings into, the one I patched up when it cracked, the one that stood like a monument to all the things I had done without complaint. I stood on the sidewalk across from it, arms crossed, keys in hand, heart quiet. The porch light was off. One shutter hung a little crooked. A crack in the driveway had grown wider, but the wind chime I gave Mom for her birthday was still there, motionless. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. I had already been inside more than most people live in their own lives. I already knew what was behind the door. I stayed for maybe 10 minutes. No one came out. No one noticed me. I turned and walked away. No anger, no sadness, just distance. Later that week, I got a voicemail from Nick. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, maybe longer. It started with a long sigh. Hey, so I know things have been weird. I just wanted to say thanks for everything you did. I know I didn't always say it, and I probably still don't say it right, but I see it now, or at least I'm trying to. He paused, like he was waiting for someone to write the next line. Anyway, just wanted you to know that I get it. I don't expect anything. Yeah, that's it. No apology. But maybe something like recognition. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't save the message, but I didn't delete it either. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. I opened the window and let the breeze in, made coffee. Not out of routine, but because I wanted to. I poured it into my favorite mug, the one with a chip in the rim that I always drank from when I was younger, because no one else liked it. I hadn't used it in years. It felt like shaking hands with a forgotten version of myself. I sat on the floor, coffee in hand, back against the couch, sunlight creeping across the rug. I didn't feel accomplished. I didn't feel heroic. I just felt like someone who had finally stopped pretending. That week, I took myself out to dinner. I didn't invite anyone. I didn't explain it to anyone. I just went. A little Italian place with outdoor seating and good garlic knots. I sat under the string lights with a glass of red wine and read a novel I had started twice and never finished. I ate slowly. I stayed after the check came. No phone, no guilt, just me. At one point, the waiter brought me a second drink and said, "It's on the house. You look like someone who knows how to enjoy her own company." I smiled. I thanked him. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. That Friday, I cleaned out my hall closet, not because I needed to, but because I felt like making space. I found a box labeled Emergency Extras that was half full of old bills, spare cables, and expired coupons. Underneath it all was an envelope I had forgotten about. Inside, a photo of me and Nick from when we were kids. I was holding a popsicle. He had a scraped knee. We were laughing. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slid it back in the envelope and tucked it into the back of a drawer. Not to hide it, but to place it where it wouldn't trip me up. Some history doesn't have to be thrown out, it just doesn't need to sit by the front door anymore. That night, I lit a candle. Lavender and cedar. I put on music I hadn't listened to in years. Not because I was trying to summon some old version of myself, but because I wasn't afraid to meet her again. And when I fell asleep that night, I didn't dream about running or rescuing or explaining. I dreamt about floating, and for once I didn't wake up tired. I didn't tell anyone about the promotion. It wasn't a secret exactly. I just didn't feel like announcing it. A new title, a raise, more responsibility. I should have been proud. I was quietly. It felt like proof that I could build something on my own terms. No help, no applause. Just steady, invisible work finally being seen. My boss had said, "You've always been the one we can count on." And for once, that didn't feel like a trap. It felt like respect. I bought myself a cake. Nothing fancy, chocolate from the corner bakery. I stuck a single candle in the middle and lit it just for myself. No singing, no spectacle. I made a wish I didn't say out loud, then blew out the flame. Afterward, I cut a slice, sat on the couch, and ate it slowly. No phone, no distractions, just me and the taste of something earned. Later that night, Mom called. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, like nothing had happened, like there wasn't a canyon of silence between us. "Hi," I said, neutral, not cold, not warm. "I heard from Aunt Trish that you got promoted. That true?" "Yeah," I said. "That's great. You didn't tell us." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "I didn't think you'd be interested." Silence. A breath. "Claire, come on." I waited. "I know things have been rough. I know we've let you down, but we're still your family." I didn't argue. I didn't agree. I just listened. She continued, "Your dad's been meaning to call. He's been tired lately. You know how he gets." Another excuse, another shift of weight. "I'm happy for you," she said. "Really? Thanks." A pause. Then, "Would you maybe come by for dinner next week? I'll make your favorite, just us, no expectations." I told her I'd think about it. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just left it open, like a window cracked during a storm. That weekend, I bought a small plant, a peace lily. I'd never kept one alive before, too easy to forget, too easy to overwater. But this time, I read the instructions. I placed it by the window. I promised myself I'd learn its rhythms. Every morning, I checked the soil. Every night, I touched its leaves. It became a quiet ritual, something small and alive that depended on me without demanding too much. That same week, I got a text from Nick. Just one line. "Hope work's going okay." I meant what I said. I didn't reply, but I smiled a little. I started cooking more. For myself. Not survival meals, not frozen trays, not takeout eaten over the sink. Real meals. Fresh vegetables. Pasta from scratch. Music playing in the background. No one to impress. Just me. One night, while stirring a pot of risotto, I realized I hadn't thought about their opinions all day. Not once. Not about what I should do, or how I should spend my time, or whether I was being selfish. I had moved through the hours freely, fully mine. That's when it hit me. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't arrive with trumpets or tears. It crept in slowly, gently, like steam curling from a cup. And I was finally still enough to feel it. I began journaling again. Nothing profound, just notes, gratitudes, things I noticed, how the air smelled like cinnamon outside the bookstore, how my barista remembered my name, how it felt to walk home without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I wrote down a line that stuck in my head: "You are not selfish for choosing quiet over chaos." One night, I pulled out the old box from the closet, the one filled with letters I never sent, cards I never gave, photos I couldn't look at before. I sat on the floor with it open beside me and took my time. Some things I threw out, some I kept, some I read twice, just to understand the version of me who'd written them. She had tried so hard. She had bent in every direction and still wasn't seen. I whispered to her, "You don't have to do that anymore." The next morning, I made a list, not of tasks, of truths. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to be proud without proving it. I am allowed to outgrow people. I am allowed to love from a distance. I am allowed to stay gone, even if they miss me. I taped it to the fridge. A few days later, I passed my parents' house on the way to a friend's birthday. I didn't stop, but I didn't flinch either. I looked at it like a landmark, not a home, a place I had been, a place I no longer lived. And that night, when someone at the party asked, "Do you have any siblings?" I said, "Yeah," and smiled. I didn't explain. I didn't unpack it. Because sometimes growth isn't what you say, it's what you no longer need to defend. It started with a Sunday morning. No alarm, no plans, just the sun pouring through the blinds and the smell of the lavender candle I'd lit the night before. I made pancakes from scratch, not because anyone asked, but because I wanted to. I added blueberries and vanilla extract. I plated them neatly. I sat at the table with real silverware and syrup warmed on the stove. No distractions, no rushing. Just the softness of the moment and the quiet thrill of choosing myself. I took a walk after breakfast. No headphones, no destination. Just the sound of my shoes on the pavement and the birds chatting in the trees. A neighbor waved. A kid rode by on a scooter, trailing bubbles. I smiled without thinking. Not because I was trying to look okay, just because I was. That afternoon, I cleaned out my inbox. Hundreds of messages, most of them junk. But in between the promotions and newsletters were the names of people I hadn't talked to in years. People I used to bend for. Friends who only texted when they needed something. Family who called only when their lives fell apart. I didn't reply. I didn't owe anyone my availability. Not anymore. Instead, I wrote an email to myself. Subject line: Reminder. I kept it simple. You're doing better than you think. Keep going. Then I scheduled it to send to me next month. That night, I started reading again. Not news, not emails. A real book. One that had been collecting dust on my shelf for 2 years. I got through 3 chapters before realizing I hadn't picked up my phone once. I fell asleep with the book still open in my lap, the pages creased, the story waiting. In the morning, I called in late to work, not because I needed rest, but because I wanted space. I didn't lie. I said, "I need a slow start today." My boss said, "Take what you need." And for the first time, I believed that I could. I made tea instead of coffee, sat on the balcony and watched the street wake up, people rushing, dogs barking, a jogger with bright orange shoes and a rhythm I admired. I wasn't rushing with them. I wasn't trying to catch up. I was just watching, breathing, grateful. That week, I bought a sketchbook. I hadn't drawn since college. I was never that good. But that wasn't the point. I started with shapes, lines, random shading. It didn't look like much, but it felt like something, like expression, like space made sacred by care. Nick called again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. No pressure. Just wanted to say I'm thinking about you. That's all. I saved it. Not because I believed he'd changed, but because I believed I had. And that was enough. I got a letter from Mom. A real letter. Handwritten. The envelope was pale pink, her name carefully printed in the corner. Inside, just a single sheet of paper. "Claire, I don't know if this fixes anything. Maybe it's not supposed to, but I want you to know that I see you. Really see you. I know I haven't said it right, or enough, but I've been thinking about all the ways you showed up, and all the ways we didn't. I hope you're happy. You deserve that more than anyone I know. Love, Mom." I read it 3 times, then folded it gently and placed it in my nightstand. I didn't cry. I didn't text her. I didn't need to decide what came next. Some things are just meant to be received. That weekend, I met a friend for brunch. The kind of friend who asks how you really are and means it. We sat outside under a striped umbrella. The waiter brought iced coffees in tall glasses. My friend said, "You seem different." Lighter. I smiled. "I think I am." We talked about everything and nothing. Work, shows, how hard it is to find good sandals. I didn't bring up my family, and she didn't ask. It wasn't avoidance, it was grace. On the way home, I passed a park. Kids ran across the grass, their laughter ringing in the breeze. An older couple sat on a bench, sharing a sandwich. A teenager in headphones danced while crossing the street. Life was messy, sweet, unpredictable. I loved it. I stopped by a thrift store, browsed slowly, touched fabrics, flipped through books, found a mug that said, "Choose joy." I bought it for $1 and carried it home like a treasure. That night, I poured myself some wine, played a record, watched the city lights from my window. My peace wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I was learning, day by day, to protect it. I no longer looked for apologies in every silence, no longer measured love in sacrifices, no longer confused being needed with being loved. I had learned to give myself what I used to beg others for: kindness, time, patience, and that, more than anything, had changed everything. It was a Monday morning when I realized I hadn't thought about them in days. Not in a guilty way, not in an angry way, just not at all. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was breathable. I got dressed for work, made a smoothie, and hummed while I brushed my hair. It was the kind of morning that once would have been filled with obligation. A check-in call, a drive across town, a task someone forgot to do. But now, it was just mine. Work felt lighter too, not because it was easier, but because I no longer felt like I had to prove anything. I did my job well. I said no when I needed to. I took my lunch breaks outside. Sometimes I called a friend. Sometimes I just listened to the wind. One afternoon, I walked to a nearby bookstore and bought a novel simply because I liked the cover. I didn't feel the need to explain the purchase to anyone. On Thursday, my boss pulled me aside. "You've been glowing lately," she said. "What's your secret?" I smiled. I stopped carrying things that weren't mine. That weekend, I hosted a dinner. Just a few friends, string lights on the balcony, mismatched plates, homemade sangria. We ate pasta I cooked from scratch and laughed until the neighbor knocked to ask us to keep it down. I hadn't felt that kind of joy in a long time, the kind that bubbles up when no one's asking you to be anything but yourself. Someone asked, "What's your family like?" I paused, took a sip of wine, and said, "Complicated, but I'm okay." And I meant it. I didn't sugarcoat, I didn't over-explain, I didn't dive into a story to make them understand. I let it be what it was, mine. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I stood in the kitchen rinsing plates and listening to jazz. The dishes didn't feel like a chore. The mess didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like evidence of something real, something I'd built. That Sunday, I visited a local shelter and signed up to volunteer, dogs mostly, some loud, some shy. One in particular, a small, scrappy terrier mix with a crooked tail, pressed his head into my hand like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone steady. I didn't take him home. Not yet. But I sat with him for a long time, rubbing behind his ears and whispering, "You're safe now." I wasn't talking just to him. I began noticing things I used to overlook. The way the light hit my windows at 5 p.m., the warmth of fresh laundry, the small satisfaction of finishing a puzzle. I even bought a bike and started riding again, something I hadn't done since high school, not to get anywhere, just to move. I deleted the old group chat, the one labeled Family Core Heart. No announcement, no drama, just gone. I didn't block anyone. I just let the door close. Mom texted once that week, "Thinking of you. Hope you're well." I replied, "Thank you. I hope you are too." It was civil, kind, brief. That was all it needed to be. One night, I dreamed I was in the old house again, but this time, I wasn't fixing anything. I was just passing through. The furniture was covered in sheets, the walls echoing. I opened a door and walked into a version of my own apartment, filled with light and music. I woke up smiling, not because it was over, but because I was somewhere else now. I started a photo wall above my desk, not full of family portraits or old memories, just things that made me feel alive, a postcard from a friend, a snapshot of the terrier at the shelter, a Polaroid from the dinner party, a quote I tore from a magazine. "You are allowed to take up space." I looked at that wall every morning. It didn't tell a story of who I had been, it told the truth of who I was becoming. The next time someone asked me what I wanted, to eat, to watch, to do, I answered without hesitation. Because I knew. And maybe that was the quiet revolution. Not a declaration, not a breakdown, not a dramatic goodbye. Just this: choosing my life, piece by piece, without waiting for permission. The holidays came quietly, no grand invitations, no emotional ambushes, just a few texts exchanged like strangers swapping weather updates. "Happy Thanksgiving." "Hope you're doing well," I replied, politely but briefly. There were no calls, no mentions of traditions or dinner tables. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty about that. I made my own plans. A movie marathon, takeout from the good Thai place, and a new set of pajamas that I didn't buy on sale. It wasn't festive, but it was free. The quiet wasn't lonely, it was peaceful, like when fresh snow muffles everything and the world softens under its weight. I realized I wasn't waiting anymore for apologies, explanations, or overdue gratitude. I had finally stopped checking the mailbox of unmet expectations, and it felt like oxygen. One evening, I ran into my old high school teacher at a bookstore, Mrs. Kent. She used to teach literature and wore scarves even in spring. She recognized me first. "Claire?" she said, eyebrows raised with a softness I hadn't seen in a while. I smiled. "Hi, Mrs. Kent." We talked for a bit, standing by the fiction shelves. She asked what I was doing now, and I told her about my job. She nodded proudly, genuinely. Then she said, "You always carried more than anyone knew." I nearly cried right there between the paperbacks, but I didn't. I just said, "I'm learning to put it down now." That night, I wrote that sentence in my journal. "I'm learning to put it down now." Underneath it, I added, "And nothing has fallen apart without me." In December, I bought a small fake tree, just 2 feet tall, pre-lit, no ornaments. I put it on my windowsill and lit it every evening, not to impress anyone, not to perform, just because I liked how it looked. One night, I made myself hot chocolate and turned on old holiday music, not the kind we used to play at home, but my own playlist. New, warm, untethered. I didn't send cards. I didn't feel bad about not sending cards. I didn't answer messages right away. I wrapped gifts for friends in brown paper and tied them with twine. Simple. Software enough. One afternoon, I visited the shelter again. The terrier was gone. "Adopted," the volunteer said, smiling. I stood in front of his empty kennel for a long time. Not sad, just quiet. I hoped he'd found someone steady, someone who wouldn't make him earn affection. I started painting, badly, joyfully, watercolors that bled too much and warped the paper. But I filled page after page, blues, yellows, sudden wild swirls. It felt like reclaiming a language I forgot I knew. I bought a second plant, a pothos. It grew faster than I expected, vines reaching like arms, trailing down the bookshelf. I named it Grace. Every time I watered it, I reminded myself I was allowed to grow too. On New Year's Eve, I didn't go out, I didn't dress up, I didn't post anything. I stayed home, made pasta, lit a candle, watched the fireworks from my window. At midnight, I whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular, and meant it. The next day, I deleted old voicemails, cleared photos that no longer made me feel anything, unfollowed people I no longer recognized. It wasn't a purge, it was a pruning. I kept what still felt alive. January was calm, my mornings slower, my evenings quieter. I began thinking less about what I left and more about what I was building. One Saturday, I drove out to the lake just to sit by the water. I didn't take pictures. I didn't check the time. I just let the wind tangle my hair and thought, "This is mine." When I got back to the car, I had a message from Dad, just one line. "We miss you." No punctuation. I stared at it for a while. Not angry, not stirred, just still. I didn't reply right away. I didn't owe immediacy. When I did respond, I wrote, "I hope you're both well. I'm doing okay." It was the truth. Some days I still felt echoes of the old role, the tug to be useful, to check in, to fill the gaps. But now I recognized it, named it, chose differently. And every time I did, the peace returned. Not loud, but full. February came with rain, steady, gray, unremarkable. I used to hate this kind of weather, how it made the house feel smaller, heavier. But now it felt like an invitation, a reason to slow down. I took longer showers, let my tea steep a little more, sat by the window just to watch the water run down the glass. There was something gentle about not needing every day to shine. One Saturday I visited a local art gallery, small, tucked into the corner of a block I used to rush past. The paintings were bright and chaotic, full of color and movement. One had a plaque that read, "This piece is not about balance, it's about survival." I stood in front of it for a long time. That felt true. That felt like me. Afterward, I walked to a cafe and wrote postcards to people I hadn't talked to in years. Not to reopen anything, just to say, "I'm okay. I hope you are too." I didn't expect replies. That wasn't the point. I mailed them anyway. That week, I rearranged my apartment, moved the couch to the other wall, hung a new print above the bed, added hooks by the door for my keys and my favorite scarf. It wasn't drastic, but it felt like claiming space, like saying, "I live here," not just physically, but emotionally, fully. I started going to a yoga class on Tuesdays, not for fitness, for breath, for pause. The instructor ended each session with the words, "You are exactly where you need to be." I didn't always believe it, but I liked hearing it. One afternoon, I found an old voicemail from my grandmother. It had nothing to do with anything, just her telling me she made too much soup and asking if I wanted some. I played it 3 times, then saved it. Sometimes we hold on to things not because they're unfinished, but because they're whole. In March, I booked a weekend trip. Just me. A cabin near the mountains with no Wi-Fi and a view of the lake. I packed books, snacks, and a thick blanket. I didn't tell anyone until I was already gone. The quiet was deep out there, the kind that hums in your bones. I took long walks, napped when I felt like it, cooked simple meals. One morning, I sat on the porch wrapped in that blanket and thought, this is what it feels like to not be needed. And I didn't panic. I exhaled. I left a note in the guest book, "Thank you for the stillness." I found something I didn't know I'd lost. Back home, I hung wind chimes outside my window, not the same ones from the old porch. New ones, softer. They made a different kind of music. I listened to them when I worked, when I read, when I simply existed. They didn't ask anything of me, they just moved with the wind. One day, I saw a photo online, my parents, standing outside the house, a caption from a neighbor, "Still the strongest couple I know." I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't scroll the comments. I just closed the app. I wasn't in their narrative anymore, and that was okay. Strength, I realized, wasn't always loud. It wasn't always sacrifice. Sometimes it was staying home, saying no, sleeping in, sending kindness without needing recognition. One evening, I ran into Mason Taylor. Remember him? The kid from down the street with the bottle rockets. He was grown now, working as a teacher. We talked for a while. He said, "You always seemed so together back then. Like you knew what was coming." I laughed. I didn't. I just got good at carrying things. He smiled. "Well, whatever you're carrying now, it looks lighter." And he was right. I was carrying fewer things, but I was holding them better. Spring came without ceremony. No dramatic thaw, no sudden bloom, just a slow return of light and warmth. I noticed the daffodils first, poking up from the edge of the sidewalk like they'd been waiting for permission. I felt that too, like I'd been buried under someone else's seasons, and now, finally, I got to choose my own. One morning, I walked to the farmer's market with a woven bag and no plan. I bought strawberries, sunflowers, a small jar of honey. I talked to the woman who made soap from lavender grown in her yard. I lingered. I let the day unfold without a checklist. It was one of the best mornings I'd had in years. That night, I lit candles and opened the windows, made a playlist of songs that felt like who I was becoming, no lyrics about longing, no melodies of ache, just softness, ease, a soundtrack for a life that no longer revolved around fixing anyone but myself. In April, I got another letter from Mom, shorter than the first, more careful. Claire, we're thinking of you. No pressure to write back. Just wanted you to know the door's always open. I folded it twice and set it in the drawer with the first. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because I had nothing new to say. Some doors can stay open without needing to be walked through. Nick posted a photo of himself at work, smiling, holding a clipboard. The caption said something about progress. I tapped the heart icon, then put my phone down. That was enough. The next weekend, I visited a small beach town a few hours away. I stayed in a motel with chipped paint and a view of the sea. I wrote in the mornings, walked along the shore in the afternoons. Let the wind pull every thought I didn't need right out of me. I didn't take pictures, didn't text anyone. I kept it all for myself. On the drive home, I passed a sign that said, "You are now leaving the past." It wasn't meant to be deep. It marked a historical district. But I smiled anyway, because I believed it. One night I found the old group photo, the one from the Grand Canyon. I almost threw it away, but instead, I tucked it in the back of my closet. Not as something to display, just something I no longer needed to sort through. Sometimes staying gone isn't about distance, it's about direction. It's choosing peace over proof, wholeness over reunion, silence over stories that rewrite themselves without you. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed to remember that I never had to disappear to find myself. I was here all along, and now I wasn't going anywhere. It sat in my drawer for months, folded, unsealed, written in blue ink on thick paper. The letter, the one I'd written after everything broke, but before I found peace. I didn't revisit it often, just enough to remember it was there. I never added to it. I never edited it. It was raw. It was honest. It was enough. One rainy Sunday, I pulled it out, not because I wanted to send it, but because I wanted to see who I used to be. I read it slowly. The handwriting was steadier than I remembered. The words were full of ache and clarity. I showed up when no one asked. I left quietly when it hurt. I carried it all. I traced the curve of each letter with my finger, like it might tell me something new. Then, without ceremony, I tore it in half, then in quarters. I dropped the pieces in the trash, not as a gesture of anger, but of freedom. That version of me didn't need to be preserved. She had already served her purpose. She got me here. Afterward, I made tea, sat by the window, watched the rain. I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt real. That week, I found a journal at a bookstore. The cover was plain, soft leather, no lines inside, just blank pages. I bought it without thinking. And that night, I opened it and wrote, "Today, I didn't ask anyone's permission to be at peace." It was the only line on the page. I didn't fill the rest. That one sentence was enough. In the months that followed, I didn't reach out. I didn't make amends. I didn't reopen wounds just to prove I'd healed. I stayed quiet, present, whole. I learned how to spend a Sunday without planning for Monday, how to say no without apologizing, how to celebrate without needing an audience. I learned how to hold space for joy without waiting for the other shoe to drop. I visited a new bookstore every weekend, bought a plant I didn't need, started keeping fresh flowers in the kitchen just because. I listened to records while making dinner and danced in the hallway when no one was watching. My life became a series of gentle revolutions. Sometimes I still thought of them. Not with hurt, not even with nostalgia, just with distance, like names you recognize in a story you once read. You remember the plot, but you don't need to reread it. One day, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a framed photo of me as a child, standing in the backyard beside Dad's old grill, holding a sparkler. A sticky note was tucked behind the frame. "Thought you might want this." no name. I placed it on the shelf, not front and center, but not hidden either. Just placed. A piece of the past that didn't need an explanation. That night, I lit a candle and wrote a new letter. Not to anyone. Just a letter to what came next. Dear life, I'm here now. Not fixing, not waiting, not begging to be seen. Just here, and ready. I didn't mark it on a calendar. There was no final date circled, no ceremony to close it all. The ending came like most beginnings do, quiet, unnoticed, gentle. One day I woke up and didn't feel the pull of the past. I just felt like living. I made breakfast and hummed along to a song I didn't know the words to. I opened my closet and chose the blue sweater, not because it looked best, but because it felt soft. I stepped outside without checking my phone. I walked to the corner cafe and smiled at the barista, not because I needed anything, but because it felt natural. I no longer moved through the world with a shield. I no longer braced for questions, no longer rehearsed answers. I didn't flinch at family names or Sunday afternoons. The places that once hurt now held space, not wounds, just room. I began writing more, stories that had nothing to do with grief. Pages full of characters who made different choices, found different endings. Stories where healing wasn't the final act, just the start of something softer. I stopped trying to write people back into my life who never knew how to stay. I stopped rewriting my worth in someone else's language. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes, I found the porch swing bolt I'd saved, the one from when I replaced it years ago. I held it in my palm like a relic, heavy, but no longer burdensome. I smiled, then set it gently in a jar marked "Done." The jar sat beside my bed, filling slowly over time with tiny pieces of closure, a key I never returned, a screenshot of the last text I didn't answer, a pair of earrings I bought for a dinner I never attended, not bitterness, just proof that I'd chosen myself again and again. That spring, I planted herbs on my balcony, basil, mint, rosemary. I watched them stretch toward the sun. I watered them with patience. I clipped the first leaves and added them to dinner like a quiet celebration. Life had become full of small parties just for me. My peace didn't arrive with fanfare. It didn't scream. It whispered, over and over, until I finally believed it. You're allowed. You're allowed to leave, to rest, to stay gone, to come back different, to not come back at all. You're allowed to be whole without applause. You're allowed to call that enough. And I did. If this story touched you, subscribe to Secret Revenge. Because some revenge needs no knives, no screaming, just one spotlight, one shining nameplate, and someone they once dismissed, rising, brilliant and unshaken. See you in the next story.